A clock you can't see keeps making itself known. Not with a chime, not with a bell, just with the same small, stubborn sound repeating at a distance. Metal meeting metal, then silence, then metal again, as if someone keeps checking something that refuses to change. A hand moves across paper, stops, moves again. The pencil tip drags softly, hesitates, then presses harder, leaving a darker line than intended. Someone lifts the page and holds it up to the light for a second, as if light could correct an error. Somewhere close by, a kettle begins to murmur. Not boiling yet, just that thin complaint of water being forced to wait. It rises, subsides, rises again. A lid rattles once, then settles like a decision postponed. Boot leather creaks. A chair complains under a shifting weight. Then stillness returns, the kind that isn't peaceful so much as practiced. The air has the steady texture of rooms that have been lived in too long without being. A breath is taken and released through the nose, slow, careful, measured. Another follows it. Someone is trying not to make noise, as if noise is a form of admission. A paper is folded, unfolded, folded again. The crease is pressed with a thumbnail, smoothed, then pressed once more. It's not necessary. That's the point. It's something the hands can do while everything else refuses to move. A match scrapes, fails, scrapes again. This time it catches. The flame is small and suddenly confident, making a brief warmth that doesn't belong. The cigarette tip glows, then dulls. Smoke is exhaled in a thin stream and disappears like it was never there. A door somewhere down the corridor opens with the soft suck of air pressure changing. Steps pass. They do not hurry. They do not slow. They are the steady steps of someone determined to behave normally. There's a radio on, low enough that the words blur into tone. The voice rises and falls like it is trying to sound calm on purpose. Every now and then, a syllable becomes clear, then vanishes again under static and distance. The sound of it feels less like information and more like reassurance someone keeps needing. Another pencil tap. Once, twice, 3 times. Then the tapping stops as if it has been noticed and judged. Hands are washed in a basin, water slapping porcelain, fingers rubbing together, soap squeaking briefly before rinsing clean. The towel is used longer than it needs to be, the fabric dragged across knuckles, wrists, palms, as if dryness can be a kind of readiness. A cup is set down too hard. The ceramic clicks against wood, then is lifted and set down again, gentler than an apology made without word. On the far side of the room, a map lies flat, its corners held by objects that weren't meant for holding. Something heavy, something personal, something found. A finger traces a line and pauses at a point. The finger does not move past it. It just rests there, pressing lightly, as if the paper can feel pressure and respond. A watch is checked, then checked again. The second hand sweeps with steady confidence, indifferent to the eyes following it. The wrist is turned to catch a better angle. The watch face reflects a strip of pale light, and for a moment the hands can't be seen at all. Someone clears their throat, preparing to speak. They don't. A chair scrapes back an inch, then stops. The person sits again, slower, trying to make the movement look intentional. A jacket sleeve is tugged down over a wrist, then tugged again, like a nervous habit disguised as neatness. In the quiet, small sounds become enormous. The ticking of a mechanism, the faint buzz of an unseen wire, the whisper of fabric as someone shifts their stance. Every noise has space around it. Every pause feels longer than it should. A pen cap is taken off, put back on, taken off again. A note is started. 2 words, maybe 3. Then the ink stops. The pen hovers over the page without touching it, suspended, as if waiting for permission to exist. And somewhere, beyond the walls of this room, the same distant metal sound repeats again, steady, patient, unyielding, counting down in a language no one admits they understand. Someone finally speaks, very softly, not to anyone in particular. Any minute now. The room stays the way it is, pretending it has all the time in the world, while time quietly runs out. The first details come the way cold leaks into a room, quiet, gradual, impossible to point at, and then suddenly undeniable. A draft finds the back of someone's neck each time the door at the end of the corridor opens. It carries a thin taste of outside, damp earth, coal smoke, wet canvas, and something sharper beneath it, oil and metal that has been warmed too many times. The corridor itself is narrow and overused, painted in a color that once promised cleanliness and now only looks tired. A strip of light hums overhead and flickers at the edges, as if even electricity is rationing its certainty. The radio voice becomes clearer when someone adjusts the dial with 2 fingers, careful not to make it loud. The sound resolves into weather first. Wind direction, low pressure, cloud cover, spoken in a practiced tone that pretends weather is only weather. Then it shifts to movement and positions described in neutral terms, as if naming things could make them happen faster. The room has maps, but not the kind people admire. They are pinned and repinned, edges torn, corners darkened from hands. Grease pencil marks cross the paper like scars. A string is stretched between 2 points and held down with a thumbtack, not to decorate, but to measure. Notes have been taped over notes, layers of correction and second-guessing. Every line feels temporary. Every marking looks like it was made by someone who did not sleep. A stove sits in the corner, iron and stubborn, giving off a low heat that can't quite warm the air. A pot of coffee is there too, thick, bitter, dark enough to stain a cup if left too long. Someone pours it without looking, the way you do when your hands know the weight of a routine better than your mind knows the time. The liquid steams for a moment, then stops, as if even warmth is outside the small windows, covered with a thin mesh and streaked by rain. There is a yard of sorts. Not a courtyard, not a garden. A space designed for moving equipment and people, never for resting. In the gray daylight, figures pass in coats and helmets, their faces mostly hidden by collars turned up against wind. They move with purpose, but not urgency. The difference matters. Somewhere beyond that yard, an engine turns over and settles into a steady grind. It isn't the smooth sound of a civilian motor, it's heavier, more deliberate. A truck idles. Another answers it. Then, for a time, they stop, and in the silence the faint clink of tools becomes audible. Metal on metal, tightening, checking, pretending. In the room, the men speak in the language of procedure. Supply came through. How many crates? Enough for the day. For the day. Not for the week. Not for whatever comes next. Just for the day. Words are rationed the way fuel is rationed. No one speaks in excess. No one asks for extra. A young clerk stands by a table with a ledger open. He keeps licking his thumb to turn pages. Even though his thumb is already wet from, his handwriting is careful, almost decorative, as if beauty can make numbers safer. He has the look of someone who still believes correctness matters more than luck. Every time the door opens, his eyes flick up. Every time it closes, he returns to the page like he's ashamed of noticing. A man near the stove folds a newspaper, then unfolds it again and sets it beside him, unread. The headline is half visible, something about an advance, a line holding, a promise of momentum. The paper itself is already old enough to be irrelevant, but he keeps it near as if printed words can anchor reality. Another man, older, with a face that has learned to hide reaction, stands over the map. He holds a cigarette between 2 fingers, unlit. It stays there. He does not smoke it. He simply holds it, as if the act of lighting it would mean acknowledging the time. He speaks without looking up. They're late. No one asks who. They're always late, someone answers, as if late is a personality trait of the universe. A laugh almost happens. It doesn't. It becomes a cough instead. The air in the room is thick with the small, familiar smells of continued living. Damp wool, ink, cold iron, sweat that has dried and returned again. There's also the clean tang of something recently unpacked. Fresh rope, new canvas, crates that still smell like pine. Someone brings in a stack of forms and drops them on a desk. The thump is louder than intended, and for a second, the room pauses, listening as if the sound might attract something. Then, when nothing follows, everyone resumes their motions with faint embarrassment, like actors continuing after a prop fall. In the corridor, a telephone rings once and stops, rings again, stops again. Each ring is brief, clipped, almost polite. No one moves toward it immediately. That hesitation is not laziness. It is a habit born of too many calls that cannot be answered with anything useful. Finally, a runner, thin, breath already shallow from hurrying but trying not to show it, moves toward the phone and lifts the receiver. He listens. His eyes flick toward the map. He says yes twice. He says understood once. Then he returns the receiver to the cradle with care, as if it could break from the weight of me. What? Someone asks, as if they already know. The runner shakes his head slightly. Nothing new. A phrase that sounds like relief but isn't. Nothing new means the same unresolved things are still unresolved. Nothing new means you are still inside the waiting, and waiting is its own kind of pressure. A messenger arrives with a stamped envelope. The stamp is official. The paper is thick. It looks like authority. It is placed on the table, untouched for several seconds, because touching it would make it. Finally, the older man takes it. He turns it over once, then opens it with a slow, deliberate tear along the top seam, careful not to rip the contents. He reads without expression. His eyes move left to right, then stop. He reads it again. Someone watches his face for change and finds none. Well? Someone asks again, quieter this time. The older man folds the paper along its original crease. It stands, like a bridge, like a plan, like a decision that has already been made, somewhere else, by someone who will never feel this room. No one argues. Not because they agree, but because arguing would imply there is still room to negotiate with time. Outside, a whistle blows. Short, sharp, meant for organizing bodies. Boots begin to sound in the yard, more concentrated now. A chain clinks as something heavy is dragged a short distance and secured. The engine noise returns, then multiplies. Men move past the window in groups, shoulders hunched. Their faces are pale in the thin light. A small act of normalcy tries to survive. Someone offers a cup of coffee to someone else. The other man takes it and nods, as if they are in a kitchen at home, as if this is simply a morning like any other. They hold the cup with both hands and let the heat sit there, trapped, briefly reassuring. Another man checks his watch and says, almost casually, still time. No one corrects him. No one says time for. No one says how much. Because time has become something they speak about the way you speak about weather, as if it is outside your control, as if naming it can make it behave. In the corner, the young clerk makes a mistake. Just a small one. A line written in the wrong column. He notices immediately, his cheeks flushing. He scratches it out carefully and rewrites it. He looks up, expecting someone to have seen. No one has. Or if they have, they do not care. Yet his hands shake slightly as he resumes. Even the smallest error feels dangerous in a place where everything is balanced on procedure. The radio voice shifts again, fading into static for a moment, then returning with a phrase that is repeated twice, as if repetition can make it clearer. The words aren't shouted. They're delivered with the same practiced calm. That is what makes them unsettling. The older man steps away from the map and walks to the window. He looks out, not searching for beauty, not looking for comfort, only counting movement, spacing, readiness. His reflection overlays the yard, making him look ghosted into the scene, half inside, half already elsewhere. He stands there longer than necessary. Then he speaks, still without turning. They'll come when they come, he says, and it sounds like acceptance. But his hand, resting on the windowsill, tightens until the knuckles show pale. Behind him, the kettle that never quite boiled begins to hiss more insistently, the lid rattling. Someone crosses the room to lift it off the heat. The hiss dies down, obedient. The lid settles. The room returns to its practiced stillness. Only now the stillness has weight. Somewhere beyond the yard, beyond the low buildings and wire and mud, the sky darkens by a fraction. Not from night, but from weather moving in with quiet determination. And inside the room, without anyone saying it aloud, the sense grows that whatever is supposed to arrive late is already close enough to be heard, because the routine is still happening, and routine is what people cling to when the last minutes are being spent. It begins with things that almost don't deserve attention. A door that should stay closed drifts open an inch and stops, as if reconsidering. A man notices it, frowns, and nudges it shut with his foot without breaking his sentence. The conversation continues, uninterrupted, the door forgotten as soon as it clicks back into place. The radio crackles, not loudly, just enough to distort a word that should have been familiar. Someone reaches out and adjusts the dial, overshoots it, adjusts again. The voice returns, thinner now, stretched, like it's traveling farther than intended. No one comments on the distance implied by the sound. Outside, the engine noise stutters. It's brief, only a second where the steady rhythm falters before finding itself again. A mechanic's voice rises in irritation, then drops. Laughter follows, forced, but functional. The engine resumes its grind, slightly louder than before, as if compensating. Inside the room, a pencil rolls off the edge of the table and hits the floor. The sound is sharper than expected. Heads turn. Someone picks it up and sets it back carefully, parallel to the table's edge, aligned with nothing in particular. Order restored. A runner enters with mud on his boots that hasn't had time to dry. He hesitates before speaking, scanning faces, as if deciding who should hear it. Then he says, "There's been a delay." No one asks where. "Again?" someone says, more tired than annoyed. The runner nods. "They're sorting it. Sorting it." The phrase floats in the air, harmless on the surface, vague enough to hold anything beneath it. No one presses him. He stands there for a moment longer, as if expecting to be stopped, questioned, corrected. When that doesn't happen, he leaves. The map on the table curls slightly at one corner, where a weight has been moved and not replaced properly. The paper lifts, just enough to cast a thin shadow under. A hand smooths it flat again, pressing harder than necessary, the fingertip lingering over a marked point. Someone mentions the weather again. The wind has shifted, Clouds are thicker than forecast. Visibility might change, it's said like a passing note, something to be filed away for later. Later feels like a flexible concept. A clerk receives a stack of revised figures. He blinks at them, then flips back through his ledger to compare. His brow tightens. The numbers don't quite match the earlier set. Not dramatically, just enough to make him hesitate. He clears his throat softly, then decides against speaking. He adjusts the total, writes it neatly, and moves on. In the corridor, footsteps come fast, then slow, then stop outside the door. There's a pause. The footsteps retreat. No one inside reacts, but several people glance instinctively toward the sound, then away again, as if acknowledging it would give it importance. The kettle is refilled, though no one asked for more water. The act itself seems comforting, proof that things can still be replenished. The flame beneath it is adjusted, lowered slightly. Someone is being careful. Careful feels appropriate. A telephone rings again, longer this time. 3 rings before it's answered. The man who lifts the receiver listens longer than before. His eyes narrow, not in fear, but in concentration. He mouths a word silently, what sounds like a time. He writes it down, then crosses it out and writes a different one. When he hangs up, someone asks, "Is that confirmed?" The man shrugs. As confirmed as it gets. The answer satisfies no one, but no one challenges. Confirmation has become a sliding scale. Outside, the whistle blows again. This time, it's answered by another whistle farther off, delayed by distance. The gap between the sounds feels larger than it should be. A man checks his watch and frowns. He taps the glass lightly, as if the mechanism might be stuck. It isn't. The second hand keeps moving, unbothered by scrutiny. He puts his arm down and says nothing. A conversation drifts into something almost personal. Someone mentions home. Not a place, just a word, tossed out casually. Another man responds with a story that trails off halfway through, abandoned for no clear reason. The silence afterward stretches, then is filled by the scrape of a chair and the shuffle of papers. The radio voice changes tone. Still calm, still controlled. But there's an extra pause between sentences now, a fraction longer than before, as if someone on the other end is listening to something else while they speak. "Say that again," someone mutters, not loud enough for the room. The radio does not repeat itself. A draft returns through the corridor, colder this time. It carries a distant smell of damp metal and smoke. The door at the end closes harder than usual, not slammed, but firm. The sound lingers. At the window, movement has increased. Groups gather where there were none before. They stand closer together. Helmets are adjusted. Straps are tightened and retightened. One man removes his gloves, flexes his fingers, then puts them back on, slower this time. Inside, the older man returns to the map. He traces the same line as before, stops at the same point. His finger presses there, then lifts, leaving nothing behind. "There's time," someone says again, almost out of habit. The older man doesn't answer. He doesn't contradict it either. Another message arrives. Verbal this time, carried by someone who clearly doesn't want to linger. He delivers it quickly, efficiently, and leaves before questions can form. The message itself is unremarkable, a confirmation of position, a minor adjustment, nothing alarming. And yet, after he's gone, the room feels subtly altered, as if a piece has been moved without anyone seeing where. The kettle finally boils. The lid rattles loudly now, insistent. Someone rushes to remove it from the heat, annoyed with themselves for letting it go that far. The sound dies, but the echo of it seems to hang in the air. No one mentions that it took longer than it should have. No one mentions the delay that keeps being referenced but never explained. No one mentions that the routines now require more effort to maintain, because nothing has happened yet, and because when nothing has happened, it's always easy to believe that nothing will. The room continues to function. Papers are filed, coffee is poured, watches are checked, words are spoken carefully, but beneath it all, unnoticed or ignored, the small signs keep adding up, quiet, patient, and waiting, just like whatever is coming next. Time does not stop. It narrows. The room feels smaller now, not because anything has changed in its dimensions, but because there is less space left for delay. The air has warmed from bodies and breath, yet a chill still lingers along the floor, creeping around boots and chair legs like something searching for an opening. A clock is checked again. This time, the motion draws attention. 2 men glance over almost simultaneously, then look away, as if caught doing something impolite. The second hand passes a mark it has passed before, but this time, it feels different, less forgiving. Outside, the engines are no longer idling casually. Their rhythm has synchronized, rising and falling together, like something being brought into alignment. The sound is heavier now, more deliberate. It presses against the walls instead of drifting past them. In the yard, the groups have stopped shifting. Men stand where they are told and remain there. Movements are economical. No one wanders. A strap comes loose and is fixed immediately. A helmet sits wrong and is adjusted without comment. These are not rehearsals anymore, though no one says that either. Inside, the radio goes quiet for several seconds longer than static fills the gap, low and constant, like breathing through clenched teeth. When the voice returns, it does so mid-sentence, as if the beginning was never meant to be heard. Someone near the table straightens a stack of papers that no longer need to be straightened. The edges are already aligned. He taps them once against the wood anyway, then sets them down with care, as if this might be the last chance to put something in. A messenger appears in the doorway, stops, then steps fully inside. He removes his cap, a small gesture of formality that feels out of place now. He delivers his words precisely, without emotion. They are not dramatic words. They do not announce anything. They simply remove an option that no one realized they were still holding. The older man nods once. That is all. The messenger waits, just long enough to be dismissed, then leaves. His footsteps retreat down the corridor, growing fainter, until they are swallowed by the larger sounds outside. There's still a window, someone says, quieter than. No one asks how wide. The map is consulted again, but differently now. Less tracing, more staring. The lines seem fixed, less like possibilities, and more like boundaries. A hand hovers over a marked area, then pulls back, as if touching it would finalize something. The kettle, forgotten after being removed from the heat, sits untouched. No one pours from it now. The idea of refilling cups feels unnecessary. Thirst has been replaced by something else. At the window, the older man watches a signal flag lift and fall once, deliberately. Not a warning, not an alarm, just a confirmation that something has been seen and acknowledged. He closes his eyes briefly. When he opens them, his expression is unchanged. A telephone ring. This time, it is answered on the first ring. The man holding the receiver listens, nods once, and says only, yes. When he hangs up, he does not look at anyone. That was the last check, he says. No one asks. Last check of what? Outside, a line begins to move, slowly at first, then with purpose. Boots strike the ground in uneven rhythm, then gradually find a shared pace. The sound carries through the window glass, through the walls, into the room itself. Inside, a chair is pushed back. Someone stands, then sits again, unsure whether standing is required yet. Another man clears his throat and starts to speak, then stops, realizing there is nothing useful left to say. The radio voice returns one final time, measured and calm. A phrase is repeated twice, not for clarity, but for certainty. The voice does not wait for acknowledgement before signing off. The silence afterwards is intentional. A watch is checked again. The second hand is nearing a familiar position. Several eyes follow it without meaning. The older man steps away from the window and places both hands flat on the table. The gesture is grounding, steady. He looks around the room, meeting each face briefly. There is no speech, no instruction, no dramatic pause. He does not need to say anything, because whatever could have been stopped has already moved past the point where stopping it would look like stopping. The room knows this, even if no one admits it. Outside, the engines rise in pitch, preparing to shift from waiting to motion. Inside, someone exhales slowly, as if bracing. The final window is still technically open, but no one reaches for it. Something changes. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in a way that cannot be undone. It begins with a sound that doesn't demand attention. A latch sliding into place. The dull final click of metal meeting metal, followed by a brief silence that feels heavier than noise. No one reacts immediately. A few eyes flick toward the source, then away again, as if acknowledging it would give it meaning too soon. Outside, the engines shift tone. Not faster, not slower, just different. The idle they had settled into is gone now, replaced by a readiness that hums through the ground. The vibration is subtle, but it travels upward, through boots, through floorboard, into bone. Inside the room, a form is signed. It is done without ceremony. The pen scratches once, decisively. The paper is slid forward. Another signature follows. The ink is still wet when the document is folded and placed into a folder already thick with similar decisions. The folder is closed. A hand rests on it for half a second longer than necessary, then withdraws. No announcement is made. Someone reaches instinctively for the radio, then stops themselves. There is nothing left to hear that would change anything. The device remains on, low, emitting only static and the faint echo of distant coordination. A runner appears at the doorway. He does not enter this time. He delivers his message from the threshold, voice level, eyes straight ahead. The message is short, efficient. It confirms a transition rather than initiating. Understood, the older man says. That word lands differently. Outside, a barrier is raised, not dramatically, not all at once, but section by section. Each movement is methodical, practiced. The final section slides into place and locks. The sound is unmistakable, even from inside, a low, hollow thud that carries the weight of intention. In the yard, spacing tightens, the casual gaps between men. A final count is taken. Someone calls out numbers. They are answered. The answers come back firm, immediate, without hesitation. Inside, someone notices the kettle has gone cold. They lift it, feel the weight, set it back down untouched. There will be no more pouring. A chair is moved aside to clear space that will not be used. Papers are stacked and pushed away from the center of the table, as if the surface itself needs to be empty now. The map remains, but no one touches it anymore. The older man removes the unlit cigarette from between his fingers and sets it down. He straightens it so it lies parallel to the table's edge. He does not light it. There will be no smoke in the room. A watch reaches a mark and passes it. No one comments. Outside, the engines begin to move. Not forward, not yet, but into position. Gears engage. The sound deepens, steadier now, less forgiving. The air carries it differently, like a promise that no longer needs repeating. The radio crackles once, briefly. A single word comes through. It is not urgent. It is not loud. It is simply final. The older man nods again. This time, several others do too. A door that had remained open all this time is closed deliberately. Not slammed, not rushed. Closed. The handle turns. The latch slides home. The room is sealed into its purpose. No one suggests waiting longer. No one asks if there is still time. Because something small has already happened. Something procedural, something ordinary, something that will never be remembered on its own. And yet everyone in the room feels it. The invisible line has been crossed. Not with a step, but with a pause that was allowed to end. Whatever comes next no longer depends on hesitation. It depends only on motion. The sound fades before the silence arrives. Engines that had filled the air with purpose ease into a steadier, more distant presence. No longer adjusting, no longer searching for alignment. They have found it. The vibration that remains is low and constant, like a held breath that will not be released. Inside the room, nothing moves for several seconds. No one speaks. No one clears their throat. Even the radio seems to sense it, its static thinning until it becomes almost imperceptible, a faint whisper that could be mistaken for air moving through wires. Someone finally shifts their weight. The sound of fabric against fabric is loud in the stillness. A boot heel scuffs the floor and stops. The man freezes, embarrassed by the noise, as if he has disturbed something fragile. At the table, the folder remains closed. No one reaches for it. Its purpose has already been fulfilled. It is no longer a tool, just an object occupying space, heavy with what it contains. A watch ticks. The sound is unmistakable now. Each second announces itself clearly, evenly, indifferent to the fact that it is being heard. The second hand moves with quiet confidence, passing marks that will never matter again. Outside the window, the yard has emptied, not because no one is there, but because everyone is exactly where they are supposed to be. The absence of movement feels intentional, rehearsed, complete. A single figure crosses the far edge of the yard, then disappears behind a structure. No one inside follows him with their eyes. They already know where he is going. The older man stands with his hands at his sides. His shoulders rise and fall once, slow and controlled. He looks at the door. He looks at the window. He looks at the men in the room, meeting their eyes without urgency, without reassurance. There is nothing left to convey. A faint sound travels through the walls, metal settling, tension redistributed, weight shifting into place. It is the kind of noise that happens when something large finishes being prepared and waits. The radio emits a brief click, as if someone on the other end has let go of the microphone. The channel remains open. No further words come. Someone reaches out and turns the volume down anyway. The kettle sits forgotten, its surface dull now, reflecting nothing. The cups beside it are untouched, lined up like props from an earlier scene that has already ended. In the corridor beyond the door, there are no footsteps. The absence of them feels deliberate, enforced. Whatever movement is happening now is happening elsewhere. A man seated near the wall realizes his hands are clenched. He loosens them slowly, one finger at a time. The relief is minimal. He rests his palms flat on his thighs, grounding himself in the simple fact of contact. Another breath is taken, then another. They sound different now, shorter, shallower, more careful. Outside, the light shifts almost imperceptibly. Clouds thicken. The sky does not darken dramatically, it simply becomes less forgiving, as if it has decided not to cooperate. A distant signal sounds, so faint it could be imagined. No one reacts. If it was real, it was meant for someone else. The watch ticks again. The second hand approaches a familiar position. Several people notice without meaning to. Their eyes do not follow it. They wait for it to pass. It does. Nothing happens, and yet the moment feels complete. The room exists in a narrow space now, after all preparations, before all consequences. A space so thin it can barely be felt, yet heavy enough to press on every thought. No one speaks the word now. No one says ready. No one gives an order. Because whatever is coming no longer needs permission. The air holds steady. The walls remain still. The men do not move. Time stretches, taut and silent, and then holds. Right there, just before everything changes.